I think the thing for me is like, first of all, she hasn't given people a reason to believe she should be trusted with the presidency. Like, at the end of the day, they reject Joe Biden. And her mission should have been show a vision for the country that would have been different than Joe Biden, a change election. And the reason why that was necessary is there was a Franklin and Marshall poll that just came out. I can link it to you if you want. But
Sure.
basically, it goes through all this stuff. This is in Pennsylvania, and it's disastrous.
Yeah.
Here, I'll link it to you.
Oh, I got it. I found it. Okay.
Yeah.
Dear readers, I'm okay.
If you scroll down, and the thing that really shocks me is the last time Pennsylvania residents thought their finances had been better than 1 year ago was October 2020.
Yeah, I
so
see that.
basically, for the entire time Biden has been president, people have been saying, no, my finances are worse off than a year ago. And like that, you can't ignore that. And like Kamala Harris did. And she just basically said, I wouldn't have done anything different than Biden. And that's the message people got. And as that's the message has gotten out, her momentum ended. It stalled completely.
Do you think, and this is crazy because like voters originally said that they weren't going to punish Kamala with Biden's economy.
She hugged him.
She had a blank slate when the swap out first occurred, which was crazy. It was like, I remember looking at polls being like, that's what a gift. What a gift to the Kamala Harris campaign.
This is something like when she first dropped out, I know you and I were like completely open to her. And I feel like that was a sign, we were representative in our communities of like the larger youth progressive wing of the parties where we were like, okay. And then when Walz was picked, we were like, okay. And like we were all chomping at the bit, ready to, jump on, become K-hivers. And the reality is, she went into the DNC. She made that disastrous right-wing speech. Ezra Klein of the New York Times, he did an analysis of it, and he said it was the most right-wing Democratic nomination speech he'd ever heard.
Yeah,
and it was.
Because it was, yeah.
And that's when the momentum stopped. And all the momentum she was seeing, all the movement in the polls that got her ahead of Trump was young people, was, progressives coming home, was, and a lot of people think of this like ideology in a totally wrong way. They think of like, if somebody says they're moderate, it means they're a neoliberal centrist. And that's not what it is. It's more of a statement of your own like persona or your own like feelings about like
time and time again ballot measures. Time and time again, ballot measures have consistently proven that the most popular thing in the heartland, in the Midwest, in the Sun Belt, no matter where you go, is a lifeless, faceless, progressive ballot measure not associated with a Democrat directly. Americans love voting for instituting full-blown communism in the form of a progressive ballot measure, but fucking despise the Democrats or despise the Republicans as well, depending on where you're looking at. So, yes, the idea that like the average independent moderate who fancies themselves to be in directly the center of all of these issues is a silly one. And ironically enough, that's why I was excited about the Tim Walz prospect, because I thought that that would actually force the Democratic Party's hand into putting forward or at least defending a progressive message, because right. Tim Walz, with a one-person majority in the state Senate in Minnesota, actually signed into law many of these measures that were considered radical by the Republican Party and maybe even radical by some in the Democratic coalition.
Well, here's the thing that's really interesting about that is notice how none of the attacks on Tim Walz were about the policies he passed in Minnesota.
Yeah. It was about fucking how he has a fake dog or how he abuses his son or all this shit. Exactly. They originally laughed and were like, oh, what a stupid mistake that they went with radical Tim Walz. He's a communist. And none of that shit actually worked even a little bit. But the problem is the Democrats actually fucking moved away from that. And it's very frustrating, especially when you have one of your most popular policies in a sea of boring neoliberal bullshit be that you are going to tackle price gougers at the federal level. with pre-existing law that already is out there.
She has is the most popular thing.
Yes, and it's very frustrating that they are not. It's very frustrating that they're not fucking. They didn't push that hard enough. Even though Donald Trump kept saying that's like Venezuela. And the only thing that happened to that policy was that it grew in popularity in that process. It literally became more popular despite the New York Times op-eds about fucking how, this is impossible to implement and Kamala is just doing this or Republicans consistently attacking it. Yeah, the moderate voters are all over the ideological map. You want to explain this to people?
So basically, I popped up from my camera. Basically,
go
this
ahead.
is a
I'm going to go pee while you explain this.
Yeah,
I've heard this a million times, but let's hear it.
This is a study from a few years ago, but it still holds true. Overwhelmingly, so this is basically a political, compass with tilted on the edge. So like the top and the left squares are like the left wing economics positions. And then being more pro-immigration is the bottom and the left, okay? So what you'll see, and these are people who call themselves moderates, and they were all given an ideological test. And one of the things you'll find really interesting about here is the overwhelming majority of people who consider themselves moderate are very left-wing. And then the 2/3 to like 70% of people are left-wing economically. Almost no one is a libertarian who considers themselves. So like libertarian square is the bottom square. There's almost no one there. And actually, there are some people who call themselves moderate who are extremely right wing, but it's very rare. So basically, when you're running on, when you see people saying like, oh, a lot of people are moderate, but that actually that's a label that's not connected to ideology. It's not like a lot of people are Joe Manchin. That's just not the case. And so that we've known this for a very, very long time, that self-described ideology doesn't describe what people support. And we can have real world tests of this. Like for example, in Florida, over 60% of people voted to restore felon voting rights. Over 60% of people voted for a $15 minimum wage. At the same time, Donald Trump was winning by like 8 points. They were getting 60% for the $50. So people are not voting for these candidates as ideological like decisions. It's a lot different than that. And so when Kamala Harris goes to the right on these issues, what she's actually doing is not really winning over a population that exists. The people that are like, I love Liz Cheney are not real. The people that love Liz Cheney are actually liberals who appreciate her shitting on Trump.
Yes.
So these are anti-Trump liberals, and they see a Republican spitting in Trump's face, and they like that. It's not like a moderate Republican who loves Liz Cheney.
She does not have. I mean, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is the greatest example of this. Nikki Haley is the perfect example of this. Nikki Haley ran against Donald Trump. Nikki Haley said, whoever swaps their candidate first wins this election. Okay, but when it was Biden versus Trump, Nikki Haley literally is pro-Trump. She's voting for Trump. Nikki Haley voters are also voting for Trump. A lot of Nikki Haley voters in open primaries were actually Democrats who also either registered for the Republican Party to vote for Nikki Haley or are also, going to end up, if they were Republicans, are going to end up voting for Donald Trump. Going after this Nikki Haley constituency is so fucking stupid. And that's precisely what the Democratic Party has done.